The same eating disorder therapist who was so great in our conversation about Ariana in my Wired article, she said, like, I have never had a client in my decade-long career of treating people with eating disorders. I have never had a client come in and sit down and attribute their eating disorder to a celebrity. And we act like this is a very new thing that's happening, but it's not. And neither is the negative discourse around it. There's this, again, like revisionist history that like back in the 90s and 2000s when heroin chic was in style, that like no one was pushing back on that. The reality is the tabloid press has always belittled women for being both too fat and too skinny. Britney Spears in her hit song Piece of Me is like, I'm Mrs. She's too big, now she's too thin. Like this negative discourse towards celebrity women for being too thin is also nothing new. The same thing has been happening for, at this point, decades, and it has not helped. It has only made the problem worse, or it has only contributed while the problem is getting worse. So we know that this mode of discourse we're engaging in right now did not work in the 90s, did not work in the 2000s, and I guarantee you it is not going to like be solving or improving the situation now. Having conversations in our actual day-to-day lives with the people around us to dismantle fat phobia is so much more impactful and effective. And also, like, I'm guilty of this too. Like, my friends and I, and like in my interpersonal life, I know I say things that although they are not, like, a lot of times it's coming from insecurity, but like I know I say things that are not dismantling fat phobia and are in fact contributing to these biases. Like, there's so much we can all do in our own lives to like combat this, and but instead I almost feel like we're pushing that responsibility onto these celebrities in place of doing that hard work with ourselves.
Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian. I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things, but I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really know how to make this one. This topic started to feel like a bit of an oversight in my Pop Girly Month coverage a couple of months ago, but it is a subject that I've really been struggling to form my opinion on over the last few years, let alone few weeks. Particularly long-term Nuance Corner friends might remember that I made a video all the way back in December of 2024 where I was grappling with a lot of these same ideas. And while some of my analysis has shifted somewhat, I am still going to maintain some of the same rules that I used for my sake and yours last time I waded into this discourse. I will not be using any images of Ariana Grande at all in this video, but we will be talking about her. And while we're going to be sensitive with the subject, it is a conversation some viewers might find triggering, and it's not one that you need to engage with if that does not feel safe for you right now. It is, however, a conversation I really wanted to have in the very specific circumstance where it's one that I get to have with a friend of the channel, one of my very favorite current feminist thinkers and writers, Kat Tenbarge. First of all, hello, Kat. As always, I am so thrilled to have you here. Like so many of the things that we get to talk about when I do have you here, it's a conversation that I know that we've been having in fits and starts in private over the last couple of years, as has much of the rest of the world.
Yes, 100%. And I'm so glad to be here and talk about it with you.
One thing that I was thinking, in part just because I genuinely have not done the amount of research that I would need to do it justice, I don't want to do like an entire background timeline breakdown of Ariana Grande's career, but one thing that's really striking when I try to think about the general pieces of discourse that get attached to her is that it's all such incredibly invasive things.
Yes.
Like it is speculation about her experience on Nickelodeon on the Dan Schneider sets, which is not something she has wanted to speak about and that has been spoken about on her behalf quite often. There's a lot of stuff about what she experienced in Manchester. Also, sometimes it feels like those things are not factored into the way that people are angry at her. Like I feel like there's a lot of individual things that I would think viewed as a whole, or honestly even just viewed one-off, would grant a lot of empathy toward her that I think is really missing in a lot of the discussions around her.
I completely agree. It's like Ariana has suffered so much trauma in the public eye. Also, I think about her relationship with Mac Miller and how after he passed away, people blamed her. They were so nasty to her in the immediate aftermath of that trauma. People were nasty to her about dating Pete Davidson. Like, there's always been so much like cruel, invasive speculation and commentary about Ariana. And I can only fathom what that would be like from her POV and how, when conflated with concern very broadly, it would be difficult for any of us to disentangle the like pure like misogyny and hatred that has been directed her way from some of the more nuanced critiques and people talking about like, oh, you like got with this man who had a 6-month-old infant. Like these things I imagine would be very difficult to disentangle. But for a long time, I've been like, Ariana has been put through the ringer. Ariana has gone through things that are very difficult to even imagine going through as an outsider.
And I know that you wrote about some of this recent round of scrutiny for your recent article for Wired, which I read yesterday and I really, really loved. I thought you handled it really well. And I just wanted to talk to you kind of about what the process was for writing that, what you learned, what you got to talk to experts about, all of that.
You know, I first started writing about eating disorders a couple of years ago. Back when I still worked at NBC, I worked on this piece for months that was about the algorithmic rise of like pro Anna and pro ED content being served to people on X, on TikTok, on all of these different platforms. And from there, I started to sort of like build out this repertoire with like eating disorder therapists, people in recovery, like experts and academics. And that has informed kind of a lot of my writing about this conversation, of course, around Ariana, and also increasingly, I think, around celebrity women in general. I keep seeing these compilations of a bunch of different women, like insinuating that they all have disordered eating or EDs. And it's really become quite troubling to witness. And, you know, as I've spoken to these different experts and people with different perspectives, everyone's take is slightly different, of course. But the one thing that everyone has had to say is like the tone of the mass discourse is not productive or helpful. And I think a lot of people really struggle with that because when you put that idea out there into the world, when you're like, guys, this isn't all good, the comment sections are just like very, very divisive. And the one thing that people online keep saying over and over again is like, we need to be talking about this in the way that we're talking about it to like prevent the next generation of young girls from getting eating disorders. And when I speak to experts about this, what they're saying is like, yeah, that's not going to work. Like that's not helpful. And it makes sense to me that it's not helpful for several reasons. And I think like chief among those reasons is that we have this unhealthy fixation on appearance. This is a societal wide issue and it's really difficult to disentangle because we all do it to some extent. And the very nature of like our visual culture implies that we're like looking at people's bodies and thinking about people's bodies all the time. But that is also one of the underlying anxieties that fuels a lot of eating disorders is like fear of being perceived in a negative or positive. Like just the fear and the confusion and the anxieties around being perceived. And I think when we talk about women in the public eye and we focus so much on their bodies, yes, it can come from a place of concern, but I worry about just like what this pervasive, like inescapable discourse is doing. And some of it is just outright not good. Some of it is outright spreading misinformation. Some of it is outright perpetuating the very problem that people claim to be wanting to solve.
Yeah, I think, and this is something that I've also heard people observe in my own comment section, so I know that it's not an original thought, but there was this moment in the press tour for Wicked Part 2 where suddenly the thing that was generating clicks had expanded, and it wasn't just these very selectively chosen and edited and sharpened and contrast turned up pictures of Cynthia and Ariana. It was suddenly like everyone in the cast. And that's when for a lot of people in my audience, their alarm bells started going off and they were like, it doesn't feel realistic that this like super strong martial arts lady is like suddenly and that nobody has noticed. And then you look at the original photos next to the way that they've been edited, and sometimes people are like just outright like viciously manipulating it, but sometimes it is something as simple as like contrast or the angle or the length of the lens. Like people look so different in picture to picture. And I think that when they pick out these pictures of these women, like you can find a picture of any woman standing in a way that you could call body checking, especially if it's a woman who is aware of the fact that her photo is being taken.
Oh my gosh, yes. The term body checking has taken on this like really shape-shifting meaning where it's like Body checking in the original context is like a practice that people who have eating disorders engage in, where it's like you have this self-fixation on your body and you're constantly looking at your body, you're constantly fixated on your body, and you're also demonstrating your body to the people around you through these types of images as like sort of like, look how my body looks in this way. And so it's a real phenomenon, but it has evolved to basically just be applied to any woman existing in public in any way. Like, it really makes my alarm bells go off too, because I'm like, at what point is someone body checking and at what point is someone just existing in a body visually? Because we can't always tell. And people also really think that they just like know everything about someone based on a single photo of them. Like, another thing that all of the eating disorder specialists have told me is like, you can look at someone and be like, oh, I'm concerned about them because I'm like looking at their body and there's reason for concern, but you cannot diagnose someone from a photo. And I see a lot of people say things like, well, now I feel like my intelligence is being undermined because like this person, their weight is so low that like, how dare you say that they don't have an eating disorder? But as difficult as it is to wrap your head around, and like as fraught as it is, this just pushes this perception that A, you can diagnose people based off of a photo alone. And it also pushes this misconception that I think is so important to combat, which is that only people existing in very low weights have eating disorders. Because the vast, vast, vast majority, the statistic is that 6% of people who have an eating disorder are medically classified as underweight, which means 94% of people who have an eating disorder are not medically underweight, which means that by hyperfixating on extreme thinness, we're also obscuring what most people with eating disorders are going through. And a lot of this discourse is not intentionally obscuring that. It's kind of like the mass consequence of where this conversation has naturally evolved.
I wanted to talk about the body checking thing for such a long time because I think it's such a good example of the way that a helpful term just gets completely bastardized, and specifically gets bastardized into a way that allows you to assume the most nefarious intent of the woman, always the woman,
always
that
a
you
woman.
are accusing of it.
Always a woman. And the whole thing is also so focused on women, because I also keep seeing people say like, we have to protect young girls. And I'm like, eating disorders are like, the majority of people who have eating disorders are women and girls. However, eating disorders affect everyone. Men and boys also have eating disorders. Non-binary people
is doing his whole thing based on men and boys having eating disorders. Like,
exactly.
I'm a bit more concerned about that than I am about a pop star who might have some kind of underlying health issue, because she's not doing it in specific pursuit of a right-wing pipeline.
For sure. I completely agree. And it's like, we are always sort of reinforcing the media stereotype of what eating disorders look like, which is demonstrably harmful, which is like the only people we need to be concerned about and also like sort of penalize simultaneously are very thin, very privileged white women. This overlooks and obscures the reality that like the average person who has an eating disorder looks like and has a life that is nothing like Ariana Grande's or any of these women who are in the public eye who have just been like constantly followed by this scrutiny. And I also take issue with the idea that what we're doing as a culture is disincentivizing or like stopping young women and girls from experiencing eating disorders, because there's no evidence that it is. There's no evidence that this has helped Ariana or any woman in the public eye, despite this conversation being very alive and very hard to miss for like the past few years. It hasn't seemed to help any of them as individuals, and why would it? Like, it doesn't even make sense that it would help them as individuals, but it also is not combating eating disorders more broadly. And I also see people constantly like do this historical revisionism where they're like, eating disorders were really bad in the 90s, then they went away in the 2000s and the 2010s, and no one had an eating disorder anymore, and now all of a sudden they're resurging because of these women in the public eye being very thin. That's not true. Eating disorders have always been going up like this entire time. They've never gone down. There was never like a period of abatement. Even the body positivity era, which I think we should go back to, like I think we need to reintroduce a lot of that messaging into the public eye, but like it didn't cure eating eating disorders. It did not stop young people from developing eating disorders. Like, what we've done as a public this whole time has not been working. And it's not just going to start working because we all do it really, really hard with the like right intentions.
Yeah. I think too, there's this element of like, and I might not be using exactly the right phrasing because I do know, again, that you're more educated on this than I am. But there's, to me, this idea that I have of like, especially a restrictive eating disorder can be something that is so competitive. And so I think elevating this one particular body type as the kind that deserves concern and that deserves attention, not only is that not going to help that person, but all of these other people who are saying, okay, I'm not in that 4% who is underweight while I'm experiencing it. It's not that bad.
Yes.
I have so much room that I could go before anybody's going to be concerned. And that's a really dangerous place for people to be in.
100%. And it's really like surreal to see people be having this conversation while perpetuating the exact problem. Because I see people say like, well, eating disorders are competitive, therefore we need to call out Ariana Grande
for winning.
Exactly. And it's like one of the eating disorder therapists who I spoke to last week was like, there's an inverse effect happening here where because people are expressing all of this concern and so much attention is being paid to this specific appearance, to this specific person, it's like incentivizing people to imitate and to want to lose weight, exactly to your point, exactly what you just said. And that is why I don't even think people realize that some of the viral posts they're engaging with about this are literally from pro-ED spaces. Like, a lot of the discourse is indistinguishable and actually coming from people who are actively, talking about this because they do want to receive that type of concern. They do want to imitate that appearance. And because the image itself is being shared over and over and over again, that's why it has become so inescapable. Because even if you want to and I think this would be like an understandable course of action. If someone was like, I'm going to block all of Ariana Grande's social media accounts because I don't like her body is triggering to me personally in my recovery or in my journey, that you should do that. Like, lots of people who have active eating disorders have said, like, if I'm triggering to you, block me. All of these people are making commentary about this using the photos of her, and not just any photos of her, because it's like, walking around Brooklyn the past couple of weeks, they have big billboards for the album everywhere, but they're really zoomed in on her face. They're not like glamorizing her body despite this like persistent media narrative that that's what she's doing. And perhaps there's some nuance there, but most of what I have seen that is truly unavoidable in public has just been her face. But what these people making this viral content are doing are they are specifically taking images, to your point, sometimes edited images, but they're like finding screenshots of the video where they can make her body appear as concerning as possible. Like, they're finding the most shocking images. They're taking those images and then they're making like green screen videos where the image is blown up behind them and they're like, this is terrible for society. And I'm like, that's part of the problem. You're making the images like so inescapable. No one can get away from this discourse.
I agree. And to me, like, and I definitely wouldn't say that I would count myself like among the people who are the most triggered by the proliferation of thinspo. Like, it's not my number one concern, but it is something that like I have to kind of take a moment and find myself in my body again, resettle my nervous system after that kind of thing crosses my feed. My reaction, like my emotional response to that, is not different if there's like some guy in front of it going like, oh,
yeah,
horrible.
Yeah.
Like the context does not change the fact that I'm still seeing the thing that you clearly knew was upsetting because you're front loading it.
Yes, 100%. It's honestly boggled my mind because it's so easy to not do this. And I've even seen a lot of commentators who I like and respect do this. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, even if you want to make a video about or an article or whatever it may be, like, you are well within your rights to write about this, to do commentary about this. As I've written about Ariana over the past few years, I have never put any photos of her like in the pieces. When I did a piece talking about like the Wicked press tour, and I like zoomed in on the Getty photo so that just their feet and the logo of the movie were in it because I did not want to inadvertently like trigger someone, nor do I want to make these images of their bodies the focal point of what we're talking about, because that in itself is part of the harm that's being perpetuated. Like, eating disorders are not restricted to being about how you look. Eating disorders are like complex, very multifaceted disorders that differ from person to person. But specifically, again, like what the therapist I spoke to told me was, she was like, I never use a patient's appearance as either like what I say is my reason for concern or what I use as a motivator, because that is not helpful. What is helpful is drilling down and figuring out what other factors are contributing to the disorder, because there's always other stuff going on, and that is what we can focus on. Like, body neutrality and decentering the body's appearance is actually key, both I think on an individual and on a much broader systemic level, to combating this crisis.
Somebody who I in particular have noticed is really inserting herself here, and I think kind of has a habit of doing so when there are opportunities to speak about other women's bodies. Yeah. And I maybe could have stopped that sentence at other women. But Jameela Jamil is referenced in your article, and she's one of many people who I think is engaging in what I don't really have a better word for than like concern thinspo, where it's like they are sharing the exact same imagery, to your point, imagery that is picked up and circulated by snark subreddits. Ironically, the same kind of issue that I have when I try to do my deep dive into Jameela.
Yeah.
Where it's like people who hate her, who have a vested interest in spreading this thing, and then people who think that they're coming at it from a more compassionate and nuanced angle, who say, like, I'm still going to use these same sources, I'm going to use these same reference photos and these same pieces of information, but like I'm going to gift wrap it for you in a way that makes it feel like I'm saying these like feminist truths. And I see that a lot from Jameela, and I especially see it here because something that I saw her say is she's kind of like leaning on her conversational right of way, where she has experience with an eating disorder herself in the past. And rather than taking that as like, maybe I'm emotionally activated and should recuse myself from this conversation, she uses it as her place of authority in the conversation to say, I was helped by people being rude to me, so I'm doing my feminist duty to be rude to Ariana Grande, because actually it's not even about her, it's about her fans. And I find that frustrating.
I find it really frustrating, and this is not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but with a lot of this, what it reminds me of is, with regards to Amber Heard, so much of what people were saying and packaging as feminist was they were like, I'm a victim of abuse, I'm a survivor of abuse, and I never acted that way, so she's not a real victim. And as a survivor of abuse, I hate what Amber Heard is doing, and I think she's like a liar, and like I think she's setting women back, and yada, yada, yada. And again, this is not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but I do think that what is like kind of synonymous here is your experience. You are the expert of your own experience, but that does not give you like the qualifications or the credibility to speak on the issue you experienced at large. It does not make you an eating disorder therapist. It does not make you an expert, and it certainly does not make you an expert of someone else's experience, but it can be a really harmful rhetorical technique to drive a misogynistic hate campaign against another woman. And like, I find it really troubling because I've seen this over and over again. Even people who have eating disorders or are in recovery or have had them have wildly different takes on this situation. So there's not like one universal truth here. And I think that gets really lost. And I also agree with you that I think a lot of it is really emotionally activated. And I've seen people say as much. And I have so much empathy for people who are emotionally activated by this. But I wish that people would like kind of take a pause and reflect on that instead of just taking their emotional sort of immediate first response and putting that into the world. Because on these social media platforms, we all have responsibility. Much in the same way that people are like, Ariana has responsibility as this huge influencing force, we all have responsibility as influencing sources. On social media, it doesn't matter how big your following is, your words can go viral and be seen by millions of people. Many of these, unfortunately, like pro-ED accounts are seen by millions of people on a daily basis because of algorithms. So what we're all putting out there publicly does matter and does hold weight and influence, but most people are not treating it with like care or concern or nuance or attaching resources. That was something the ED therapist I spoke to was like, if people really cared, why wouldn't they direct their audience to recovery resources? Like, why wouldn't they examine their own behavior? It's just passing judgment and scrutiny, and yes, sometimes concern onto these figures, but people aren't following through and treating this with like the sensitivity and responsibility that it deserves.
I also think that there's something, again, this is like directly in response to something Jameela Jamil said, but like there's something so misogynistic to me about this idea of like her team needs to be reining her in. Her team needs to be controlling her appearance better and making sure that she's not harming the children. And it's like, I don't think that I can feministly agree that a team of people should have autonomy over how a woman dresses. Like, I don't think I'm on board with that, actually.
Yeah, I agree. It's like, I understand that it's like, it's a fraught conversation, but I totally agree with you. I think this impulse in itself is really patriarchal. I think the surveillance is really patriarchal. We don't do this to celebrity men's bodies. It is very, very different when it is a woman in the public eye versus a man. And this idea that women celebrities need teams of people around them to control their every decision, you don't really see that like with male celebrities in the same way. In the case of Ariana, I'm sure some people have made comments like that about Pete Davidson, but like certainly they have not made them to the extent that they make them about Ariana.
If you're interested in a fuller version of this conversation, you can find it over on my Patreon. I try to cut some stuff for time on the main channel, but I love posting longer versions of the conversations that I get to have for my videos over on the Patreon. I think it's a lot of fun to just talk to people and get to hear their perspective, especially when they're people who know more than me. I post supplemental content there every month. Patrons get to know what's going on ahead of time, and they very, very tangibly help me to support myself. If you would like in on that, or if you would like to support me in other ways, you can find all of that linked in the description below. Thank you so much. It's been rough, especially because I still haven't managed to get my food stamps turned back on, and that changes all of the calculations for my whole, like, almost making enough money to survive thing from a couple months ago. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me. Let's get back to the video.
And yeah, with Jameela, Jameela is such an interesting case because it's like she herself has gone through so much, to your point, she has gone through so much of this exact discourse, but she flips it against other women at the drop of a hat. She made fun of Amber Heard, she made fun of Blake Lively, then she blamed Blake Lively for legal actions that were a result of Justin Baldoni and Melissa Nathan, and now she's saying this stuff about Ariana, and it's like, you know, it's such a slippery slope. It's such a slippery slope because if we really normalize talking about celebrity women's bodies in this way, then like, where does that go from here? And we already do this, but it's like, are we going to further normalize the policing of celebrity women's bodies and being like, she looks like she gained or lost X amount of pounds? Because I see it all the time. And it's so brutal on all ends of the spectrum. And I don't think that doing it when someone has a very, very low weight is better than doing it to someone else. Like, I think it's all bad. And I don't think any of it's going to produce any positive outcomes, even if that's what people want and those are their intentions.
You know, as we've discussed, my opinion on this whole situation, it has evolved a lot because at the time when the first movie was in theaters, I was in kind of the same boat that I'm seeing a lot of. You know, I haven't been watching other people's videos about this, I'm going to be honest, but a lot of the, like, titles and thumbnails are like, we need to talk about this. We have to talk about this. We have to have an honest conversation about this. And it's like, how many conversations do we need to have?
Yeah.
But, like, I do understand why people are titling it with something to that refrain, because my whole feeling at the time was I was like, I think it's kind of, like, shitty that we're saying that we can't talk about this because it's impolite.
Yeah.
And, like, I think the reason why I see the way that I feel about this more as an evolution than just hypocrisy is because it's like, it being impolite is not the reason that we shouldn't talk about it. Like, it's dangerous is the reason that we shouldn't talk about it. And so, like, I'm comfortable with shifting my opinion on that, and I was doing a lot of thinking of, like, should I take that old video down? Like, I think I'm just gonna, like, link to this one in the description, because I do think, you know, kind of like having a record of the evolution of thoughts when it's something where it's, like, not directly, like, I don't think that video that I made was super harmful, again, because I didn't use any images of her in it. If I had, like, been green screening her and putting myself in front of it, I would have felt very differently about whether or not I should take that down. But, like, I think sometimes sometimes we participate in conversations as best as we can with the information that we have at that time, and that like really the best that we can do and that we can hope to do and that we can hope to hold each other accountable to do is to do better moving forward with more information. And so like I'm grateful for the opportunity to do that.
Yep, I completely agree. And I think it's such an important thing to keep in mind. Like, I even think about this with regards to topics that I feel so informed, much more informed on today that I didn't 5 years ago. And I'll like look back at an old tweet or something and be like, that's the opposite of like how I feel about this topic now. Like I can't even believe like how much my own thoughts have evolved, but ultimately that is a good thing. Like ultimately the end goal of everything that we do is to try to get people to evolve their thinking. So I also think that like there's this defensiveness that kicks in online where it's like if someone says something about any of these celebrity women or about like thinness and celebrity in general, and then someone is like, hey, actually like that's why your take is like contributing to misinformation, or like this is why you shouldn't be saying that. People's immediate reaction, and it's psychologically very normal to do this, but it's to double down. And it's not just to double down, but it's often to invoke like feminism or a marginalized group and be like, this is why I made my comment. And like, if you disagree with my comment or if you think that I shouldn't say it, you're hurting all women and you're especially hurting the most vulnerable women. And it's like the reality is a lot of times they're not like a lot of times you're not helping these women and you're not necessarily like advancing the pursuit of feminism. And like I think about how one of the other aspects of this conversation is like we must denormalize the thin beauty standard. And I agree that we should like not denormalize, but I agree that like these standards exist and they are very harmful. But I think where I disagree is in how people are going about it. Because I'm like, if you want to change the perception of thinness, we have to come at it from the side of dismantling fat phobia.
Yes.
Not just further like demonizing these women and their appearances. Like we absolutely have to dismantle fat phobia in our society. And that's a totally different conversation from what we are doing when we attack these specific women or even express concern for these specific women for how they look. Like my biggest takeaway from all of this is just like the conversation cannot end with these women. It must go further. We must have an active political, social, cultural project of dismantling fat phobia. That is like what must happen in order to do this. And I also think like it's very interesting and very telling to me that the people we identify as the influences of thinness as the standard are the people who are also victims of that standard. People who we suspect have eating disorders, and then we also simultaneously assign them so much responsibility and blame for perpetuating the very thing that they're a victim of. Literally, one of the people who has done so much harm in normalizing pro-Ana content is Elon Musk. Because Elon Musk owns the platform and he knowingly is allowing these algorithms to flourish that suggest this onto vulnerable people's feeds. X knows about this. I've personally talked to representatives at the company about this. They have no excuse for this to still be happening 3 years later, but I never have seen anyone do an actual critique of Elon Musk and the people at these platforms for producing these algorithms that do this on a massive scale. That's one of the major influences that we can actually go after. And it's ironic because I think one of the problems here is a lot of these like misogynistic influences in our society. Ironically, some of what Ariana was trying to critique in her video, although I'm torn on the video, like I'm torn on it for sure. But ironically, this is what one of the things she was trying to critique. But like the men and women, the executives, the media executives who sit in those boardrooms and like tell these children that they need to lose weight if they want to be on Disney Channel or whatever, like those people are out of sight, out of mind. The people who are at the forefront of our conversation are the most visible individuals, but a lot of the people who are doing the most harm are getting away with it scot-free because we don't even know who they are. I'm like, it's media executives, it's advertisers, the people making the decision to put stuff on our Instagram feeds. Like I get bombarded with ads for like over the counter or like even black market GLP-1s that are like, you lose 5 pounds for your next vacation. Like that's really terrible. Like we need to dismantle that type of advertising. And the other component of this that I actually see a lot that I feel like people are working through in the comment sections about like Ariana, or I see people talk about like, you know, having had an eating disorder and being like, my family perpetuated these ideas. Like my parent was the first person to tell me at a young age, like that I needed to lose weight or that I was getting like too fat or what have you. And I'm like, yeah, so much of this is generational, like generational trauma, basically. And that is a huge conversation that needs to happen within people's homes that cannot be solved just by like celebrity discourse.
And I think, too, maybe my final thought here is just that Ariana, to me, it feels like she is backed into such a no-win situation.
Yes.
Because if she were to come forward and she were to say, yeah, I have been struggling with an eating disorder, that would confirm all of the people who are saying that they think that she has some kind of responsibility to recuse herself from the public eye and that she's intentionally harming people. Like, and I think a lot, and I've thought about this, again, as you said, our opinions about Taylor Swift have always been nuanced and have grown more nuanced recently. But I've always thought about this since Taylor Swift's Miss Americana documentary, where she mentioned her own history of disordered eating, but she mentioned it in this way that's very like, that used to be a problem. It's all done now. I zipped it up. It's over. I'm no longer struggling with that, because you are not allowed to struggle in public.
Yes.
Like you're just not. It is so often something that I see even in smaller figures, but people who are in recovery for an eating disorder and they have some kind of platform that's based on another thing like fashion or music or something. You have their comment section accusing them of body checking, accusing them of relapsing and not being ready to be honest about it, because there's this idea that they must constantly disclose. It feels like such a no-win situation to be public about struggling with this kind of thing.
100%. And that also reminds me, I posted on my Instagram story that I got this like notification that was like 7 years ago, you posted this Instagram story. And it was so haunting because as I was writing the Wired article, I got the notification for an article I'd written about Eugenia Cooney 7 years ago. And that article was in the wake of Shane Dawson's horrible documentary about Eugenia Cooney, where he and her both present her as in recovery, like her eating disorder, because she's disclosing it and because she got out of a treatment center, it's in the past. And I spoke to eating disorder experts back then too, who were like, yeah, so that's not accurate. Like, that's not accurate to portray to the public that, like, now that you have received any treatment, it's basically over. You're actually just at the beginning of your journey. And in fact, for a lot of people who have had eating disorders, that journey will be lifelong. And yeah, I completely agree with you. Ariana is backed into a no-win corner. And I just, like, I feel so much empathy for her. She cannot win in this situation. And the last thing I'll mention is the type of discourse that I have found to be the most insidious and egregious is I see people say, like, if Ariana, and they don't even frame it like this. Like, when I frame it like this, I'm like, I don't even want to speak these words. Like, it feels so wrong. But it's like, people say, like, if Ariana dies from her eating disorder, I better not see any of you say that you feel bad if you didn't call it out. And I'm like, what? This is unbelievable to me that people are saying this, but I'm also not surprised. I've seen that sentiment so much. Like, if she dies, her fans who didn't talk about it are responsible. And I'm just like whoa.
Preemptively gloating about the concept of being right if she dies. That is so fucked up. Like, I don't understand how people can do that and convince themselves, again, that it's through this, like, feminist lens. They're being these brave truth tellers. Yeah. Just, like, they're trying to be silenced. Like, fuck off. That's heinous.
It's so heinous. And I see that sentiment, and I just see, like, the nastiest, snarkiest sentiments. And the conversation has turned from, we're not allowed to talk about this, to, like, everyone is just concerned. And I'm like, no, they're not. No, they're not. Don't play with me. Like, I'm on all these social media platforms. Like, a lot of them are just being, like, absolutely brutally cruel to her. Some people are concerned, yes, but that's not this whole story. And I imagine that as a public figure, it has to be so hard to separate out. Like, some people are absolutely horrible to me. other people are just concerned about me. Like that's got to be tough. So this whole thing, in summation, like it's fraught. Lots of people have different perspectives, but at the end of the day, I just think that people need to take all this energy they have for this one celebrity and for celebrity women who are very thin more broadly, and like there's something we could do that's really positive with this energy. We could educate ourselves more about eating disorders. We could work to dismantle fat phobia, and we could actually work to like spread recovery resources and try to make it more accessible. And we're not, but we need to, and we could, and we should.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you so much for coming on to have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. Viewers can find your article in Wired, but where else can they find you, Kat?
So, spitfirenews.com is my newsletter. The best way to follow and support me is to subscribe. You can subscribe for free. I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram at Kat Tenbarge. And thank you so much for having me. I treasure this discussion space so much. It's one of my favorite corners on the internet.
Thank you so much. Yay. Thank you again so much to Kat for coming on for this and so many other wonderful conversations here in the Nuance Corner. You can find Spitfire News linked in the description below as always, as well as the article from Wired that we were talking about today. I will be back soon. I love you. Bye.